And I just hope you believe me on this, but I tried very hard to make a serious and proper HDR analyze video about this game, but it appears to me that my version of the game, and just my version of the game, has a serious bug, because I couldn't defeat the first boss at all. And we know exactly that I'm a very, very experienced player, so it can't be me, it must be the game. But let's be serious for a moment. I tried really very hard to progress in this game, to have a lot of HDR content what I can analyze, but unfortunately I was not able to defeat the first boss. And of course it is not a bug, it is me, because I'm just a casual player. And I have to admit, and that's no problem at all for me, those games or a game like that is not made for me. I'm just a casual player. I can't spend, or I don't want to spend hours of hours just to defeat one of the boss. That's just not what I like to do. But again, I tried my very best to analyze HDR in this game, but with the limited HDR content what I had, it actually was really hard. And the only reliable source what I found in terms of analyzing the maximum peak brightness in this game was this puddle in the very beginning of the game. But I would say let's start with the most important thing first. And a very important thing to know is that this game does not support the HDR system level calibration on the console, and I am very sure that the same counts for the PC version, but I couldn't verify this because my Steam version didn't even start at all. There's a well-known issue with the Steam version, and I just learned very late that there is actually a Microsoft Store version as well, and yeah, right now it's downloading. But no worries at all, we don't need the HDR system level calibration on the console or the PC because we have a lot of HDR settings in the game. So let's start with the maximum brightness setting, and what this setting is doing is setting the maximum peak brightness for specular highlights. And at this point I can just assume that this setting is actually doing what it is supposed to do. Because even I set the maximum brightness to 1000 and the standard brightness to 500, my maximum readings in terms of the peak brightness and specular highlights, and in this case in this puddle in the very beginning of the game, was just 800 nits. But we need to keep in mind that I'm limited in terms of HDR content. I had really a very hard time to find a reliable source in terms of maximum peak brightness, and the puddle in the very beginning of the game was really still the best source actually. I couldn't progress in the game, and I saw of course a couple of YouTube videos where you have different locations, different scenarios, and I'm very sure if I would do my HDR analyze in those scenarios or levels, I would maybe have also a different maximum peak brightness and specular highlights. But let's move on to the standard brightness setting, which is set to 300 when you start the game for the very first time, and I found it actually a little bit too much for my LG G2 and the LG CX when I played the game in HDRG. And by the way, I have to say, HDRG in this game just fits perfectly. Even this game does not support the HDR system level calibration. It really looks like it is made for HDRG. But anyway, after I tested different standard brightness settings, I decided to decrease actually the setting from 300, which is the factory setting, to around 250 with HDRG enabled. And if you play this game with dynamic tone mapping on or a similar mode, I would actually recommend to decrease this setting even further, because I found dynamic tone mapping on is just way too bright with standard setting 300 or even 250. But again, this is of course personal preference. And now let's move on to saturation, and this setting as always has no impact at all in the maximum peak brightness of the game, so you can change this setting as you like it. And now let's talk about the brightness setting, and what I found is setting 50 is not a bad value to start with, but if you think the picture looks a little bit washed out, then just decrease this value slightly to 45. And last but not least, we have the contrast setting, and what I found is that factory setting 5 is actually a very good value for me. I couldn't find any reason actually to change this. The only time when I thought I need to change contrast as well was when I used dynamic tone mapping on, because then I actually increased the value to around 7 or 8, but the downside is you're getting very powerful colors, so I needed to actually decrease then the saturation level to have not very reddish flames. But again, this is a personal preference. Give it a try, and if you think you found a very good setting actually for your TV, put it in the comment section. So what is my summary now about HDR in Wo Long? And I apologize if I'm pronouncing this in the wrong way, but what I think is HDR is doing an okay job, not a great job in my opinion, but the problem is, again, I couldn't verify anything else apart from the very beginning, which I would say is the tutorial with a very, very difficult boss. But I have to admit, even I died a lot, and I mean I died a lot. I had fun until it started to getting a little bit, to frustrate me actually, the game, because I was so close at some point to actually kill this bloody boss, because I watched, of course, a couple of YouTube videos, and I knew that in the second phase from the boss fight, you just need to bring the damage level actually down to half, and then you win the game, or you win this particular fight. But I was so close and I failed again, and at this point I just decided to give up, because I spent already hours, and that's just not my type of game. I was at some point just very frustrated, not because I lost all the time, because I haven't had enough footage or content to do a proper HDR analysis. And that's why I apologizing in advance if I do anything wrong in terms of settings. But again, I did my very best, and with the few HDR, peak brightness or specular highlights what I had, I think I'm on the right track. But again, I can't verify more. But if there is any chance that someone maybe can get me a save game on the PC version, maybe Steam version when it finally runs, or the Microsoft Store version, and we can exchange save games, I'm more than happy to verify my results. Thank you very much for watching me. I see you guys next time. Bye.